glory to Jesus Christ, and welcome to this week's episode of God with Us Live. Every week, we're joined by men and women, monastics, clergy, and laity, exploring exciting and inspiring ways to live our Eastern Catholic faith today. Your host is Nick Medelsky, husband, father, and tonsured reader of the Ukrainian Catholic Eparchy of St. Nicholas. And now, here's Nick.
Hello and welcome once again, God with Us Live listeners. Excited to be with you again today. We have a very exciting guest, as we always do, to find out more about our beautiful Eastern Catholic churches. My guest today is Jocelyn Abyad. She is the wife of a priest and also very involved with busy kids, the busy classroom, all things busy. So welcome today, Huria, and why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our listeners?
Well, thank you very much. I am truly honored to be here today. I'm really excited to talk to you. But as you said, yes, I am Huria Jocelyn Abyad, and my husband is Father Ziad Abyad, and we have 7 girls on earth and 3 babies in heaven. Our girls range in age from 1 to 19, so we're doing the gamut. We've got toddlers to young adults. I am an Arizona native, and so I feel very fortunate to serve alongside my husband at St. John of the Desert, which is in Phoenix. And, my family is here. My longtime friends are here. This is really home for me. And then recently, we've kind of started the journey of homeschooling our 5 youngest children, though I don't think the toddler really counts for school yet, but she will when she gets there. And then, as you mentioned, on the side, I suppose, for several years now, I have written articles for Busy Kids magazine, chiefly the icon reflections and the sensory bin activities, which is, the really touchable interactive play for the youngest learners. And then as an extension of that, I created and head up the Busy Classroom program, which I write and develop the curriculum for that. And then that led to the opportunity very recently to start writing for God with Us publications as well. So we've just launched a new monthly publication with them. And then my last piece is I have a little social media account, Melkite Momma, and I share liturgical living tips and our homeschool adventures on there. So kind of dabbling in a lot of different realms.
Fantastic. It's always exciting to hear, and I've followed Melkite Momma for a little while now, and it's kind of cool to talk to you in person, well, kind of in person through the magic of the internet, right? But to get to know a little bit more about the different things you're involved with, and we'll talk more about those things, especially busy kids and liturgical living and all that kind of cool stuff. But I thought first we'd start with you and kind of your faith journey. Were you always involved with the church growing up? Is that something that happened later on? How have things changed over the years? Those sorts of really simple, easy to answer questions.
We all have a journey, right? My journey to the East actually has been an adventurous one, I would say. I grew up in a faithful Roman Catholic family. I was always very involved in the youth groups and volunteering. So that aspect of my life, I feel like, has been a really consistent thread. I ran an arts and crafts program at a local homeless shelter in high school. I was a life teen leader. So I would say my faith was always really integrated in my life and what I was doing and serving others. I remember my high school counselor asking me what I want to do, after high school. And I just said, I'm not really sure what I want to do, but I want to help people. And so that's kind of come in different forms, but definitely through the church. So I really formed in the Roman Catholic Church. And then I was looking for a good Catholic husband and met my husband, and he told me he was Melkite Catholic. And I very vividly remembering, oh great, a heretic. I truly had no idea that the Eastern Catholic churches existed at that point in my faith journey. And, he explained it to me, and I went home and Googled it just to make sure he wasn't sorely mistaken. And I've had to learn, very humbly to admit, yes, honey, you were right. I was wrong more than once now. But he introduced me to the Melkite Church. And that was honestly a beautiful journey and something, that we did together. He already had discerned that he felt he had a calling to the priesthood at that time. And so we knew we wanted to raise our family in the Melkite Church, but it was a little bit of a crisis of faith for me, to be honest, because I had really formed a mindset that the Roman Catholic Church was the truth, and this was the only way that the truth looked. And so it was very difficult for me initially to accept that the truth could look more diverse than what I had been raised with. And now, I just appreciate the richness of the Catholic Church and all of our churches coming together. And I feel so much more depth in my faith knowing both. But at the time, all those years ago, it was a real wrestling that I had to do in my heart. So that's kind of my basic faith journey.
So I guess this question, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but could you talk a bit about, being raised Roman Catholic, going from, a church where, at least the idea is that most priests are celibate, right? That there are some married priests in the Latin Church, but going to the Melkite Church, and not just where there's married men who are ordained priests, but being married to one. Could you explain how kind of that progression went and things like that?
Yeah. Well, like I said, it was initially just educating myself on the richness of the theology and the idea that the reality could exist, to be married to a priest. But in the beginning, I would say I was very ignorant, and I think that I imagined the role of a priest's wife as a fairly glamorous role. Some place of privilege, I suppose. And now I realize and my husband was just ordained in 2021. So we haven't been doing it for too long, but he was a deacon for years before that. So I feel like kind of lived the clergy wife life for a while in that. And now I realize it's lots more work and far less glamour. But I do love it. And if I'm being honest, it really challenges me to be obedient and humble. And I think that helps my personal faith, but my own growth, my own spiritual growth as well, because in my marriage, I have obedience to my husband, but then as a couple, we have obedience to our bishop in the church. And naturally, I'm a pretty feisty, call it like I see it kind of person. So there are a lot more times when I need to hold my tongue. And I really believe this is good for me. This is what God is calling me. And it is growth for my own personal spirituality. And then on top of that, I feel like it's given us a deep sense of the responsibility to those that we serve and the people that we're talking to. And not just at our parish, but in life. I know that people look to us as representatives of the church. And frankly, that's a heavy burden. And I know all too well how a bad experience with clergy or church leadership can be truly damaging to someone's faith. And I never want to be the source of that. And on the flip of it, I believe it's really such a privilege to be in a position to encourage people's faith journey and to walk alongside them. And really through the social media things that I've been doing, not just like my local friends and families, but Eastern Catholic families all around the world, which has been probably my biggest joy in kind of making my ministry public. So serving not from a superior position, but from the viewpoint of really being a village, creating that village of support where we can learn from each other and live out our faith authentically. And being a clergy wife, being a priest's wife just really brings that to the surface for me of the gravity of that responsibility of continuing to grow in my own faith so I can help others.
Beautifully put. Beautifully put. So, as if there wasn't enough going on in your life, encountering the Melkite Church, coming from the Roman Catholic Church to the Melkite Church, marrying a man who felt a call to the priesthood. Somewhere along the way, you also decided to homeschool your children. So how did that decision get made? How did that come up? And what kind of challenges, I guess, did you face in making that decision?
Yeah. I would say deciding to homeschool was definitely a process. My mom was a public school teacher and principal, and very involved in the public education system here in the Phoenix area. My husband and I both went to a traditional model of school. And so when we started parenting, it was the default decision to send our kids to school. And so I had a few friends who homeschooled, but I never really thought it would be for me. Like, that's great for you. That's not really in my plan. There were also logistic considerations. For example, I was working until our fourth daughter was born. So we had to get ourselves into a position where I could be a stay-at-home mom. And so until that happened, it was just kind of at the back of my mind as something that was lovely, but not for me. And then once I was staying at home with the kids, God just kept tugging on my heart about it. And I was still fearful, just fearful that I wouldn't be able to do it, fearful that I didn't know where to start, and just kind of, again, imagining that was something lovely for other people, but not for us. And then I would say two factors kind of began to align. One was that our family grew so much and we have such a wide age range of children that I started to become essentially at the mercy of multiple school campuses, multiple school calendars, on top of that, multiple teachers. And so I was spending 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours every afternoon taking people to the various schools they needed to be at with a toddler in tow. And that started to make it a lot less valuable in sense of my time management, if you will. But again, still fear-driven and just not ready to take the task on. And then COVID came and they sent everybody home. And all of a sudden, I realized what a beautiful life it was to have us all home together. And so that was really my proving ground. It was the COVID closures. So that was a spring of 2020. And we navigated that with everybody, forced home, if you will. And from that moment on, my husband and I never looked back. And the primary driver, to be honest, for that decision was flexibility. Not only gaining back so much of my day, taking out of the car and the driving, but to be able to live our faith. Because I realized, before going to church for a 7 p.m. prayer service was super difficult to then get the kids up at 6 a.m. the next morning, get us all out the door. And so I resented going to these prayer services and trying to juggle it all. And suddenly my eyes were opened that, wow, we can go to church and you know what? We can start our day a little later that next day, So it really gave us the freedom to live liturgically, to live our faith in a richer way than we were able to previously, just by taking our schedule into our own hands. So I would say those are the primary reasons. I mean, it's always a journey. There's a lot of factors that came into play, ways that I learned how not to be so afraid of it all. But those were my primary motivations, was just trying to take back our schedule and be able to really put God at the center of everything we were doing.
So if there's someone who's kind of on the fence about homeschooling right now, and not to put you on the spot, but is there any kind of advice you might give them or encouragement that it really is something that can be done? You don't need to be, steeped in some obscure philosophy about this or that, or have, a PhD or something to homeschool your kids. Is there, kind of a piece of advice you could offer?
Well, first I would say I'm so glad that we live in a country and in a time where everyone can find the school system, if you will, that works for their family. And I'm really grateful to the people who encouraged me when my kids were still in public school and it was not a reality for my family to homeschool, and just know that they were making best decisions that they could with that time. But I would really encourage all families to discern whether or not they are called to the homeschool life. There are so many resources out there to get you started, and the laws are different in every state. So I would point you to, look for those resources. They are out there. There's a huge convention each summer in Arizona that just inspired me and gave me the tips to get going. Tap on the shoulder of homeschoolers that you might know. If there's nobody in your circle, you can reach out to me. I'll help you get started. But I would encourage you that God really does provide. And the modern way of learning in an age-based classroom is truly a modern way of learning. And it is not the way that we have to learn. And I think that's the biggest thing, is this real mindset shift that learning can look different than perhaps what we were raised with or what we presently know. And that richness coming full circle can allow you to point yourselves, your family, your own soul back to God. And I tell my girlfriends all the time, I'm like, parenting is the most sanctifying thing I have ever had to do. And certainly spending my days with my kids really, calls me to be holy, to work on myself, so that we can work out our salvation together. And that's an exciting and joyful thing. It really is joyful.
Beautifully put. And I think you mentioned something there that's very important to remember, which is homeschooling may not be for every family. And it's important to discern that decision. And sometimes, might be in a place where homeschooling is just not a possibility for various reasons. And that's important to remember too. You know, we homeschool our kids, but I don't believe that everyone absolutely has to homeschool their kids or they're going to turn into juvenile delinquents or something like that, right? It's something that you need to carefully discern, and something that, if it's a possibility, I encourage people to look into it. If it's not, that's okay. There are plenty of ways to work with different educational systems, like you said, the different possibilities we have here in this country. That's an important thing to remember, I think, because I tend to talk up homeschooling a lot, but it's important for me to remember too that people need to be reassured that you need to make the best of your situation, and sometimes that's not homeschooling, and that's okay.
Right, right. I mean, the calling for us as parents is to work out our children's salvation, right? And there's
Right.
multiple vehicles to get there. So whatever education system you're picking to be involved and integrated in that for yourself and for your children, that's what we're called to. But in that light, and as you pointed out, I do think homeschooling is the easiest way to do that. That doesn't mean it's the only way. But yes, I would encourage everyone that there are so many resources. It really is it's a beautiful life.
Absolutely, absolutely. A very, very hard agree, as the kids say on that. Well, once again, Nick Medelsky, your host today on God with Us Live, speaking with Huria Jocelyn Abyad. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we'll talk about liturgical living and some of the cool resources with busy kids that have come available within the past month with God with Us. I'm excited to talk about those things, so stay tuned here on God with Us Live.
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Scenes with the Saints. You've probably heard of St. Gregory the Theologian, but do you know about his parents? His mom, St. Nonna, grew up in the 4th century in Cappadocia, the daughter of holy Christian parents, Philetatos and Gorgonia. When she grew up, she married the wealthy landowner Gregory of Oranzius, who, much to her dismay, was pagan. As her son later recorded, she felt half united to God because he who was part of her remained apart from God. She spent tear-filled days and nights praying and fasting for her husband's conversion until one night, Gregory had a dream. In the dream, Gregory found himself singing a verse from the Psalms. "I was glad when they said to me, 'Let us go into the house of the Lord.'" The words were unfamiliar to him, but he felt the sudden urge to go to church. When he told his wife about all of this, Nonna told him she would be overjoyed if this came to fruition. Desiring to become a Christian, Gregory journeyed to Nicaea, where the First Ecumenical Council was in progress. He was baptized, ordained a priest, and even consecrated Bishop of Nazianzus. At the same time, St. Nonna was made a deaconess, put in charge of performing works of charity for her husband's new flock, and devoted herself to prayer. Together, they raised 3 future saints, St. Caesarius, St. Gorgonia, and their most famous child, St. Gregory the Theologian, also called the Younger, one of the Cappadocian Fathers. At one point, St. Nonna was suffering from a serious illness and appeared to be near death. Her son Gregory rushed to be by her bedside, but was still some distance away when St. Nonna had a dream. In it, Gregory appeared to her with a basket of bread made from the finest flour. He made the sign of the cross over the loaves and encouraged his mother to eat. When she awoke the next morning, her strength began to return and she made a full recovery. Several years later, her husband, St. Gregory of Nazianzus the Elder, passed away at the ripe old age of 100. St. Nonna spent the rest of her days in prayer, joining her husband a few months later, after giving the Church 4 great saints through her prayers and saintly example. Thank you for listening to this episode of Scenes with the Saints. Join us next time when we learn more about the lives of these holy men and women.
Welcome back, God With Us Live listeners. Nick Medelsky once again here with you today, and we have Jocelyn Abyad on the line with us, and we're talking about all the different wonderful things she's involved with at Busy Kids, the dwelling place, and a lot of the other resources that through this partnership between God With Us and Busy Kids we're able to bring to you. A lot of other wonderful things there. Homeschooling we talked about a lot too in that first half, and something we brought up and mentioned a few times in that first half that some people might not be familiar with, although it's kind of grown in popularity over the past few years, is liturgical living. It sounds really cool. It is really cool, but some people might still not be familiar. So could you kind of explain what that is and what that looks like? Because again, it can be nice to come up with a fancy definition, but what does that look like in an actual real world family?
Well, I mean, simply put, liturgical living is basically guiding your life by the church's calendar, the feast days, the fasts, rather than, spring, summer, fall, winter. Of course, the seasons still affect us, but ordering your days around the church and her calendar. And for me, practically, I think the first thing as Catholics is really the sacraments. So, bringing the holy mysteries to the forefront of your family life, meaning that, for example, our teenagers have an earlier curfew on Saturday night because we get up early and we go to liturgy on Sunday morning. That is the priority. We don't join sports that have games on Sundays as well. That is our day for worship. And then kind of like I mentioned earlier, attending those additional prayer services during Lent, attending the liturgies for the feast days. And so just living that sacramental life as a family. We go to confession together as a family, and giving our children first the richness of that intimate relationship with Christ through the Holy Mysteries. And then the fun aspect of that, because I am the first one to admit those things are hard work, especially when you have small children, or even maybe when you have teenagers who aren't so keen to practice the faith with their family, as we all go through that natural wrestling period in our lives. But the fun part is also making those things a celebration. So, maybe having a cake for our child's name day, for their saint's feast day, not just on their birthday. So truly making a celebration out of living our faith and bringing that home. If we sometimes do food, we sometimes do a craft, but again, acknowledging what's happening in the church and bringing that home to our domestic church with the kids. So high level, that's about what it is making those holy mysteries alive, and then not having that be disconnected from what's going on in the home.
Yeah, that's very nicely put. And I think sometimes it can seem a little intimidating. You can see people who do the liturgical living, and they've got a special bespoke craft for every single feast day, saints you've never even heard of, right? And they make sure to do all these things. And so it can get a little intimidating for some parents, but that's not really what liturgical living is about. It's about doing what you can, again, in the circumstances you're in, and finding ways to sort of relate our lives to the church calendar, to our personal liturgical anniversaries like baptism and things like that. And it doesn't really have to look super confusing, right?
Right. In fact, it should be more cohesive. It's the idea that our faith life is our life, that it's not separate from our day-to-day, but something that is every day, God at the center.
Absolutely. So speaking kind of liturgical living, one of the places that I find a lot of liturgical living resources for our little family is with Busy Mom and Busy Kids. And I know you're one of the, can't remember the title, associate editor or something like that, right? As well as a major contributor to the Busy Kids magazine, and very involved with The Dwelling Place, which is one of those resources we're able to offer at God With Us through the collaboration with Busy Mom, but also the Busy Classroom. So would you just kind of, I guess, talk about everything you do over there? Busy Mom, there's a lot of different aspects of it you're involved in, and I can list them off and ask each individually, but how about I just let you kind of walk us through them, and kind of how you got, I guess maybe start at the beginning, how you got involved and how it kind of grew from there.
Yeah, it did kind of flow pretty organically. So basically, I had been following Busy Kids magazine for years. Busy Mom is Lynn, and so we're now friends, but and collaborators and work together a lot. But I'd been following Busy Kids magazine just, as a regular family, because I was so excited to find resources that were made for Eastern Catholics, because I had been teaching Sunday school at our parish now for 15 years, but somewhere along the way, and just every week, reinventing the wheel, looking at Orthodox resources, looking at Roman Catholic resources, and trying to find some middle ground where I could create resources for our own family and for our parish. And so when I found Busy Kids with these robust activities and interesting stories, I was just so excited about the resource myself. And so when we started homeschooling, I was able to dive in even more. And that is about the same time that I started my Melkite Momma account. And really for the same reason that I wanted to be just another voice out there that living an Eastern Catholic lifestyle was feasible and realistic, and didn't have to be so difficult. And so with my Melkite Momma page, I started interacting more with Lynn because I would videotape us or take photos of us, doing her different activities. for my own Melkite Momma content, and of course crediting her, but more in collaboration. And so the fruit of that really became, she asked me to become a contributor to the magazine. And so as far as Busy Kids magazine goes, I started writing the icon reflections. I love iconography. I think it is such a rich, fascinating way to study our faith. I love that icons are accessible to everyone, especially children who can't read. The lessons are still there for them. And so that's so important to my heart. So I started with the icon articles. And then from there, at the same time, I started, in my mind at least, the concept of the busy classroom. So I would start inviting 1 or 2 families over to our home, and we would have a feast day party. And if you can imagine like a Pinterest birthday party, they were definitely a little over the top. And we would just go all out to celebrate the feast days. So, for example, I remember us celebrating the Ascension, and I had a blue cake with clouds on it and Christ on a toothpick floating out of the sky. And we played with shave cream clouds, so these really rich, fun activities. And we had so much fun doing that, with our friends. I thought this has to go out to the bigger community. And so side by side with that, of course, I'd started homeschooling and became familiar with the idea of homeschool co-ops, where families come together and each family contributes to some part of the lesson. And they, meet for it depends on the form, but in our form, it's a half day. And we brought Eastern Catholics from all over the Phoenix Valley together. So today that looks like we're in our third year of our public co-op. And we have 10 families, over 40 kids. And we basically take the content from Busy Kids magazine and turn it into a half-day program. So we do a little icon lesson together. We read the gospel for the coming week. The puzzle that's in the magazine, we blow it up and put it on a big butcher paper board, and we do it together as a group. And then I add to it and typically create some type of physical game. We might do the craft from the magazine. And we also definitely always have some kind of fun or silly snack that is related to that piece.
And I know last year the homeschool co-op aspect of Busy Kids kind of came out, and this year it's kind of transformed a little bit into Busy Classroom, I think is what it's called. And so incorporate it for not just homeschool co-ops, but also for faith formation programs as well. Could you talk a bit about that, why that change, or maybe not change, but adjustment was made?
Yeah. So, again, so many things overlap for me. So while I'm doing this homeschool co-op work and getting more integrated with Busy Kids magazine and my writing there, side by side with that, I'm obviously serving at my own parish, and we were really wrestling with the concept of Sunday school and what to do with Sunday school. And I think, like a lot of other Eastern Catholic parishes, at least those that I'm interacting with, we are smaller communities. So we might have, 30 to 50 children with a very wide age range, from infant all the way up through your teenagers, and 3 volunteers if we're lucky. And so a grade-based program just isn't feasible to implement with those kinds of numbers. And so I realized how well this concept, this multi-age classroom, if you will, coming together to learn different themes of the faith could really be conducive to the homeschool atmosphere, to the Sunday school atmosphere. So applying the homeschool concept to the Sunday school, essentially. And this really came out of a philosophy that my husband and I have for our parish, that parents are the first educators of children. And the role of any Sunday school or family catechesis at the parish should be to support that role. And so we moved to this family catechesis model where we meet once a month, and the children do have, a fun, rich activity. We teach them lessons, and then the parents are also learning and meeting together. And we just had a fantastic response at our parish from this model. And I was essentially stealing from, if you will, the busy classroom. So at the national level, I put out one curriculum, but at my own parish, I was kind of dividing it into two, if you will. We were doing the co-op, and then on a Friday with homeschool families. And then we were doing similar, but not exactly the same, because some of the kids are in both content for the Sunday school program. And so in talking to Lynn and other families and other parishes, I realized that our marketing to say that we were just for homeschool co-ops, because it was originally Busy Kids Co-op program, was really not showing the true depth of the program and the true value that it could have for anyone, whether it's, just like I originally started out, you and another family who want to do this on your own, or a parish who needs a robust Sunday school experience for their parishioners, but is limited on resources, can come together and use the materials. And so that is what drove the shift to, calling it a co-op and just limiting our audience simply by the name, to showing that really this is learning for anyone, and to give parishes like my own, like so many of our Eastern Catholic parishes, a valid option of education for their children.
What kind of feedback have you gotten from people in different situations on maybe from the co-op aspect of things, or even the faith formation aspect of things? What has the reaction been?
It has been so positive. I think as Eastern Catholics, we're just refreshed to see that there are options available to us to teach and form our families. I think people feel empowered and excited again about the materials that are available to them. And I was just talking to the team at God With Us yesterday, and in the day and age of Instagram and Canva and things like that, where anybody can make beautiful graphics, we need to, as faith formation leaders, step up our game. We need to make these same beautiful resources available to our families, because our faith is beautiful, and they're hungry for it, especially as Eastern Catholics, right? We have this little wedge, and we need to fill that with our faith and with the beauty of our traditions.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's a very important thing in faith formation, and I know something that Father Daniel Dozier's been big with at God With Us is pushing us to remember that there's no reason that these resources we offer can't also be beautiful, right? Especially in this age where everyone's very Instagram savvy and graphic design savvy, like with Canva and things like that, that there is such a need to just make these things beautiful, right? Aesthetically appealing, I guess, is the fancy way of saying it.
Exactly. Our faith is beautiful. Icons are timeless, but the images in a lot of the resources that have previously been available are not. and we've learned, right? And we need to meet communities where they're at. And if your parish is big enough to have a grade-based program, I'm so excited for you, and that is wonderful. But I think the reality of our Catholic faith is that there is beauty in all ages worshiping together. I get on my high horse a lot about that on Sundays in particular. Sunday is a time for the family of God to worship together, which means that there's going to be some noisy kids there. And there's going to be some moms who are super tired and grouchy because they stayed up all night last night. And there's going to be some elderly folks who move a lot slower than I would like them to. And we're going to come together and we're going to worship together, right? There is time for silent worship. There's a place for that, but it's not Sunday liturgy.
Right.
Learning and worshiping as a family is integral to who we are as Catholics. And we need to remember that as part of our identity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, once again, Huria, Jocelyn, thank you so much for joining me today for the podcast here at God With Us Live. For people listening who'd like to follow you on social media or maybe would like to find out more about the Busy Classroom and your articles at Busy Kids, where would they go?
Yeah, you can follow me, message me, reach out to me on Instagram, Facebook. I even have a little YouTube channel, though having a baby last year has put that a little quieter than other things. But Melkite Momma, MOMMA, is where you can find me on there. And then the Busy Classroom is on busymom.com. There's a link there where you can sign up and request to have those guides sent to you every month. It is free. And the Busy Kids magazine is also free to print. You can pay for the subscription to have an actual magazine sent to you, which is a gorgeous resource to have at home. But even all these resources are available to you for free to just roll out. And again, I would just encourage anybody, whether it's just one other family in yours, or you want to roll this out in your parish level, reach out to me. I'm happy to help you get started because this is good work.
Absolutely. Well, once again, thank you, Huria, and thank you, everyone, today for listening to God With Us Live. It's always wonderful finding exciting things to talk about in our beautiful Eastern Catholic churches. Just wonderful things out there, wonderful resources, and excited to be a part of God With Us and bringing those resources to more people. God bless.
Joining us for this week's episode of God With Us Live. Make sure to tell a friend or two about us and subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. Don't forget to follow God With Us online on Facebook and Instagram for even more great content about the Eastern Catholic churches. And don't forget to check out all the other great Eastern Catholic podcasts at godwithusradio.org, where faith meets life. God With Us Live is a production of God With Us Radio, hosted, produced, and edited by Nick Modelski. Send us a message at info@godwithusradio.org.